and welcome back to WAAAGH Tactics. We're here to talk about supercharging your Titanic walkers with some combos. And of course, we're going to be talking about the basic walkers as well. I don't want to leave any of our beautiful Dread Mob out. And I'll also give a quick shout out to a Gargantuan Squiggoth during this video, even though he hasn't got much love, because it's all things Titanic here today on WAAAGH Tactics. So we're going to talk about some of the models that are in contention today, right? A lot of the time people talk about my big boys or big walkers, stompy boys, and they go, hey, they're too soft, they're too pricey, they're too unreliable. They look at our Deff Dreads, too soft, too pricey, too unreliable. They look at our Killa Kans, too slow, too pricey, too unreliable. So today we're going to discuss all those things, how we can become a little bit more reliable with them, how you kind of should perceive them when going into a game, understand their flexibility, their versatility, their strengths, their pros, their cons, and hopefully you can find them on your list, either your competitive, casual, league games, whatever it may be, because as we always show lists on this channel, you should be able to find something that reflects what you want to play after looking at this list with examples. So like always, before we jump in, let's take a shout out to our sponsor, the Baron of Dice. For the Baron of Dice, assist us in all things hobby related and allows us to do our paint competition. So shout out to Baron of Dice, as we appreciate the assistance with getting our WAAAGH Tactics Dice. Check out the description for 5% off, because nobody likes taxes. So today, of course, guys, it's time to get into it like always. So today, let's talk about supercharging our Titanic walkers. So, of course, first off, let me get this. Boop, there we go. We're going to start off with the Gorkanaut and Morkanaut with some tactics. So, first of all, I'm going to cover everything here, guys, from the keyword to the basics, whether you're a new player, an intermediate player, or if you're considering taking them on a GT level. So, first off, let's start with the keywords. So we have Titanic, Towering, Walker, and of course, the Transport. I had to put the 12 in there because a lot of people keep forgetting that they are not Transport 6 anymore. They are Transport 12 now, which that is actually significant. We'll talk about that in a second. So we go detachments. I'm always going to advise strictly Dread Mob here and Warhorde if you really want to integrate, let's say, a Gorkanaut into your list because you just feel like you have one, you want to put him in your list because you want damage 6. That's totally fine. He's just way better in Dread Mob. Both of these are the Gorkanaut and the Morkanaut. Of course, we have the basic mech. The basic mech is highly advised for both of these gets. We'll talk about that more, but we call them the mech tax around here, right? I call them the mech tax. If you're going to be taking our Titanic boys, just understand that a lot of the time you're going to be paying for the mech. As for, do you want to bring a mech per Titanic walker? Ooh, that's a little bit of contention here, boys, right? So let's say you're bringing a Stompa, a Morkanaut, and a Gorkanaut, which is, I've actually done this, brought them to RTT, that's fine. I only brought 2 mechs. That's because a lot of the time I felt that my one individual mech would be able to assist with giving +1 to who's ever going out first, and then he would kind of stick around and tag along to the second guy. One would babysit the Stompa. So all in all, you know, as these guys die, sometimes your third mech kind of dwindles in the air and doesn't have something to do. So I sometimes bring a second one. Can you bring just 3, one for every single Titanic walker you use? Yes, because he is great value. How is he great value? Because the +1 is very obvious, right? What you really need to consider as an Orc player is your Titanic walker might not get one shot. Now, a lot of you guys are going, he always gets one shot. Well, I understand there are times he can get one shot. Yeah, there's some times where you just kind of early expose him. He doesn't really get killed right away. Maybe he's in a lane where only a few guns can target him. Here's when the mech comes into play. Because he's a transport, the mech can jump out, give him the +1 after he's already moved. Therefore, if he gets bracketed, mech can help offset that if he's already been bracketed from losing too much damage. So sure, you can't heal him all the way past the bracketing range, but +1 does offset it because both of these guys have innate +1 to hit on the wall. One's for shooting, one's for melee, of course. Then, of course, we're going to talk about the strategy, strategic reserve, right? A lot of the time, Orc players as a whole do not utilize strategic reserves. You guys do not utilize rapid ingress target. I know you don't. I know you don't. It's very common that Orc players simply don't use strategic reserves when it's on the battlefield. And if they do, they just let stuff naturally come in. They don't play the extra CP for an ingress. Gorkanauts, Morkanauts, mostly just Gorkanauts here, are really good strategic ingress targets, right, guys? A lot of the time, because you brought them in on a battlefield edge, only a couple enemy guns can actually line up on them and end up trying to shoot them in retaliation if they have to take oncoming fire. And it helps them cover the distance to get up the field earlier, right? A lot of people understand that your orc list is already going to be creating space going forward. You should keep that in mind, that you're looking to create space for your Gorkanaut if he's going to choose to come in from strategic reserves. Let's talk about a little bit of the distinctions here, right? And I will go back to the transport talk because that is important to me. So we have the Mork. Now, the best part of the Morkanaut is simply his 5-up invuln. Yes, that's really just the best part about him. You're paying extra for that 5-up invuln and for his potential on his ranged offense. Now, his firepower is a bit underwhelming, actually. He sits at about strength 10 with his main arm cannon, and then strength 9 with his custom mega blasters that are on his body. He doesn't really have great volume. Therefore, his firepower is underwhelming, but that doesn't mean the enemy doesn't respect it, right? The fact that you can simply tell your opponent, hey, this is what he can do. He can hit on 4s. He can re-roll the entire hit roll. He can get +1 to wound, +1 damage from big shells for bigger gets. The enemy just simply has to respect that, right? It's not that they won't always respect it, but they have to understand that you can do this, and it might make them behave a little differently. Not to mention that he can still punch. He can still grump. He's still flat damage 6 on his punching. He still has a moderately respectful sweep attack. All right. Typically, whenever he's doing press the button, he's already kind of hazardous. So if you're going to roll for him, it's because you're scared that he's going to roll more hazardous. I understand that for 1s and 2s. But if you're going to just go in and you're actually hoping to do damage for him, I pretty much always choose sustain. I know he can get additional AP when you roll 6s to wound, but the volume he has is simply too low for me to advise that. And the strength, 10. Yeah, I understand you're going to want to use lethal, but a lot of the time, if you're actually shooting at something that you're trying to pop with him, you're going to use CP in other ways as well. So lethal kind of offsets his low volume and kind of helps you to actually deal with his low AP as well. So overall, yes, he doesn't shoot that well. He's more of what I call him out the distraction. He's more of a distraction kind of effect, more about the first wave, right? If you're running multiple Titanic walkers or just a stompy big list and all in all, because you have, let's say, dreads, cans, other units we're going to talk about on this list, things inside of a dread mob detachment, your Morkanaut actually is going first. You would think he doesn't because he's the shooting one, but that actually kind of works because guys are still kind of far away for him to actually interact with if he was just simply trying to punch them. In Dread Mob, he does have the ability to advance and shoot. Therefore, you can take advantage of that, throw him up the table to get him on OC. He does have the 5-up info, so he can actually bait out an investment from your enemy. And that's really the best case that I've really thought about bringing up. Now, is he expensive for, bait? Yes, but he does require a heavy investment from your enemy. In this case, you can actually draw out things that are valuable. If you're playing against World Eaters, maybe they'll throw Angren at you. Maybe they'll throw on a big brick of Exalted 8-bound at you. Now you can start getting some active trades of problematic units and the terms that you want because you wanted to put Mork there. You were okay with him dying. If you're using your Stompa and you can actually lay down retaliatory fire down the field, you can actually get people to expose those lancers and stuff like that too for your Mork. So Mork's more of your waste. He's not horrible, but for theme purposes, I have brought him. He does work, just far shadowed by the Gorkanaut. So the Gorkanaut is really what you really want to bring if you're bringing a Titanic Walker. Right, we talked about the transport capability here. Both of these guys, before I move on to the Gork, I want to mention that you can take advantage of their transport capability. Now, if you're going to deploy these guys on the line, I'm going to be showing you guys layouts, some of the terrain layouts and the GW deployments, and then I'm going to try to kind of guide you through where I would advise putting these without all the context of, let's say, a mission, a list, or an opponent, but just simply where I look at these guys and I want to hide them. One thing to consider is if you're playing these guys and you're just simply putting them on the line because threat saturation, you're not really scared about the enemy, understand that their transport capability becomes useful because you can simply stick something like Storm Boys inside of them, right? I know that the Orc player, I'm just having a brain fart, Joshua Cowell was just one with Orcs. He was saying, hey, I bring my Orcs and I put them on this table. I don't end up putting all my Storm Boys on the table. Something I've been advising to you guys. In this case, you put those Storm Boys inside the Gorkanaut and the Morkanaut because they will disembark. They will now be deployed around the line, disembark 3, and then move through 12, and then possibly advance and charge into something. Not that you always want to, but there are targets early games for them to punch out. All in all, the fact that they can stand right on the line, disembark 3, and then moves means your Storm Boys move quickly up the field to do secondaries, to stage up, to pull in more reserves. Let's say your other Gorkanaut's coming up the field. You need something there to deny the enemy from pulling that space from 9 inches, right? So a lot of the time I like to throw my Storm Boys all the way forward. Or you can just simply put flash kits. You can put 5-man units of flash kits in these Gorkanauts, Morkanauts. Once they get blown up, once they end up, let's say, going to the middle, they play their flank, whatever it may do, the flash kits can get out. Maybe they're staged up behind terrain and they understand that the enemy wants to blow them up. Well, flash kits get out, they move through the terrain and they start shooting and interacting with the game, and you're not wasting that transport capability or his big staging location, because units can actually sit inside of him and stage alongside with him. You can put Ludas in there with him because the 12 capability means anything you're going to really think about doing with a truck, you could do with him, besides the fact that he's not dedicated transport. Works for both of these guys, right? A lot of the time, the transport capability is simply slept on these guys. I advise you do not sleep on it. It is really good for just helping maintain momentum and pressure. Now, with the Gorkanaut, yes, he gets +1 to hit in melee during the wall. Like I said, alongside the mech, that helps offset if he becomes bracketed. So he can still hit on 2s once he's actually been in a prolonged fight. Another thing is his range is actually very impressive, right? Everybody knows that if you're an Orc player, volume is key, right? We understand that quality is important for some armies. They're going for high damage, high AP, whatever it may be. For Orcs, quantity is our quality. So whenever you look at a unit, a data sheet, and you go, wow, this actually has high volume, understand that that can be exploited for us a lot of the time, and we want to exploit that. That being said, the Deathstorm Cannon on your Gorkanaut becomes a very versatile tool. If you're going into a high toughness unit and you choose lethal, you can end up putting a bunch of wounds on this guy just from choosing lethal without actually pulling rerolls, right? Let's say you don't even want to use the rerolls for big shells for bigger gets and rerolls to hit. You could use that as well, but let's say you don't even want to. The fact that he can choose to use volume of fire of lethals makes a difference. The fact that it's sustained means he can just chew away a bunch of T3 infantry because of strength 6, ends up clearing chaff. His rockets can go off and it feels pretty nice. But his shooting always ends up catching the enemy off guard, and you always end up chewing off more wounds than they expect. One thing is he really does have the most value from the mech, like I said before. So if I am taking a mech, the mech is really always trying to get along and be alongside of him. He is cheap for 265 points. The Mork isn't where he's at, where I want him to be, but he can be. But the Mork Gork is where I want him to be for 265 points. As for the button, he actually appreciates all terms of the button, meaning I don't really care to always force it. Sometimes you don't want your model to lose wounds. Sometimes you don't feel like forcing the button. You simply want to roll for it. In his case, because he has a volume of firepower and his melee is respectable in volume as well, meaning when he just simply goes for the button, sometimes it ends up working in his favor without you caring. A lot of the time, this works more for melee. If you're going to just punch, I do suspect you just choose what you want to pick, which a lot of times is sustain because you're just rolling 1 dice for it. But for his shooting potential, you know, just sometimes letting it roll and shooting all of his guns can feel really good. Even getting additional AP sometimes can end up really making the difference in chipping up away enemies. Another thing I want people to not forget about if you're an Orc player is if someone is trying to screen one of these guys, understand that you can tank shock to push these models out of your way, right? You tank shock, you blow up a couple of them away with your rolling them over with your high toughness, and then you pile in into combat. So don't allow screens to just simply get in your way with these big boys either. Understand that they can tank shock and they have the firepower to shoot. So it's harder to actually make a screen for the Gorkanaut than people will anticipate because his volume of fire, and he can run in there and end up charging as well. And yeah, of course, you can always miss when you roll the button, but that's why sometimes you don't really care. Now, here's a little example I want to give as to here's GW layout 1 on tipping point. If I had a Titanic Gorkanaut / Morkanaut, we're just going to write it out here with a little drawing piece. We're going to just say this is, I believe I had this for take and hold when we're starting here. So a person will be asking, hey, Eddie, what I want to do here. I don't have the list for everything, so we're just going to simply try to do this quick. In layout 1, this is actually favorable to melee armies. Let's say you're an Orc player and you understand that Gaz. I went too far ahead. Guys. I'm trying to use my poker. I got a poker here. Okay, guys, make sure I can get this poker going. You guys see it? Yes, you can. Okay, a lot of the time, my green little circle here, this is where you're going to put your Killy, your Break, your Gaz. Maybe it's a truck, whatever, that you're really scared to go with. Where are you going to put your Gorkanaut / Morkanaut? Now, this is actually a favorable position for your Gorkanaut Morkanaut to stage up, as he can simply go up, go into the middle, and sit here for the majority of the time when you're staging in the game. Now, can an enemy come down the northern lane and take a lane on him and end up shooting him? Yes, but if one enemy can really shoot him in an activation with one model, you have other problems there, and it was going to happen anyways. We don't place game plans off exceptions, right? You can also have to worry about this lane of fire if he can end up shooting a shot through here. So just understand that you are advancing to stage into this middle piece of terrain. Well, why this middle piece of terrain? Well, these blue pieces allow you to, one, actually step over that, but be actually hidden from shooting. And two, this allows you to take advantage of what we spoke about earlier. If you fit the Gorkanaut here, you can actually take advantage of your flash gets getting out and filling this terrain piece, whether it's maybe some grots filling that terrain piece. And they can actually sit here and end up interacting with stuff that's on the terrain, stuff that's trying to sit on the outside of this terrain piece and actually not interact with you or stage up into you. And you can end up making a wall here if you simply get grots out and the enemy decides they're going to run into you, right? Say the enemy is actually sitting near their natural expansion over here in this corner, and they want to move towards you. If you have grots that have simply disembarked and they're in this terrain already, they can reactive move and make a line right outside this terrain. So now your enemy's out in the open, right? Now, let's say that you already have stuff that's dedicated to you wanting to stage up in this middle. You're playing with Gaz. Maybe you want to take Zagra and you want to throw him up in here because you have Zod on your list and there's no other good staging locations for Zod. That's where then again, you can still use this for strategic reserve. Well, why is that? Well, how many of actual lanes of fire are coming in on this side of the table if you take here or if you end up coming in here? Now, you can still move over a blue. I would say the southern location is actually worse for you because the line of fire from the enemy's deployment usually already has something down this main line, right? So when you're coming in from strategic reserves, you're going to be looking for this northern part, and you're going to be staging in the middle with something like a Zagra or a killing potential unit. Why does that matter? Well, it means the enemy does not want to stage up here to simply allow you to stop your reserves, because then you can leapfrog from here to here and then pile in and end up tagging this objective in some kind of ways with, of course, orc maneuvering and such like that, right? So if you are playing on this deployment, whether you are deciding I'm going to stage in the middle and use my Gork as a big melee pressure disembarking transport staging piece, you can use that here. Or if you're coming in from reserve, understand that this simple staging piece from the middle should be allowing you to stop and threaten the enemy from blocking out your reserves. Also, a simple snick rot. When people ask a lot of time what I do with snick rot, a snick rot can go here or it can simply go up here. Of course, this is more threatening because you're closer to the enemy deployment zone, so don't be a bonehead. But a snick rot can simply go here because he does have lone op and he won't get shot from this very big, obvious line of fire. Just know that if you do end up trying to use this for coming in from a strategic reserve location, there's a huge line of fire here, right? So that's one place I would like. One little layout that I would like to discuss as to what I would do with a Morkanaut / Gorkanaut if I was to play on Tipping Point GW layout 1, for anybody who's a little bit newer, wanting to see a visual example of what you would do there. Now, we move on to my boy, the Stompa. Now, I absolutely love the Stompa. A lot of the time people look at the Stompas and they say he's unplayable, he's absolutely trash. And I say, you're probably playing a WTC. I understand and I feel bad for you, because you don't have the glory of the Stompa, but the rest of us on GW terrain actually do. So a few things here is, one, the mech tax. If you are ever using the mech, you understand that you are the Stompa, you're always using the mech. There's no way you're going to run him without it. He needs the extra +1 to hit. Nothing to argue here. Next thing is, the Stompa is heavily reliant on CP. When I say heavily, I mean you must understand that you're going to at minimum use 2 CP on him every turn, if not 3, maybe even 4. Yeah, you can end up going off on him. But of course, I'm talking about Dread Mob. Now, what you're always going to do is, 1, Daka to re-roll the entire hit roll for him. You're going to choose sustain for him because you want all his weapons to get sustained because they're high value and sustained firepower. And 2, a lot of the time you're going to use big shells for bigger gets. Now, other options you might use, 1 is a CP reroll. Having a basic CP reroll in the bank for your Stompa is huge. It's huge because last thing you want to do is go 1 CP for Daka, 1 CP for big shells for bigger gets. Roll my Deff Cannon. 3 shots. Oh, that sucks. Okay, so the Deff Cannon, even though it says 3d6, when you roll a CP, do a CP reroll stratagem, you don't have to roll only one of those D6. Because the gun is simply all 3d6 of the shots, meaning it's not 3 individual guns that are each d6 shots. It's one big gun for 3d6 shots. It means one CP reroll means you get to reroll all 3 shots. So make sure you definitely keep that CP in the bank, because you do not want your Deff cannon to fall short on the turn that you decide to actually go all in. The 4th CP you might end up using him for is actually for advancing and shooting. Now, because he can get assault and then he can reroll the advance, means you're going, hey, I'm going 10 with my Stompa. I'm going 10 with my Stompa, and then I'm possibly moving another 4 minimum because I'm in rerolling the advance. I'm going off averages here, right? That means your Stompa can now move 14 inches. Your Stompa is roughly about 7 inches wide. That means you can actually start to clear about 6-inch worth of terrain pieces that are in the middle of terrain. He can move around. He can move around and he can actually touch. We look at his keywords. He has Titanic, Towering. That means he can simply walk up and touch terrain to look over it. When you are deploying the Stompa, which we will show you when we do the layout thing again, I would say a lot of the time you want to talk to your TO or the person you're playing with and go, hey, when I'm deploying this, are we using his big old arms to be in the deployment line or not? If we are, then that means I'm using them for line of fire. And if we're not, then he's much easier to deploy or not. Some people will say just argue this to your TO. Some would say play it as it is. As it is, you're a walker. He has to be within the deployment zone. And if people can actually gain line of fire from his arms, if they choose to not make terms with you. Next thing is detachment. I always say just play Dread Mob. Of course, you can do Warhorde. Not really worth it. Seriously, tremendous shooting. When I say he's tremendous shooting, I'm saying 1 Death Storm Cannon, when you invest 2 CP on him for reroll hits of big shells for bigger kits, kills Canis Rex 9 out of 10 times. Even if he rotates Iron Shield with the 6 up, Feel No Pain, whatever. You can easily delete the disgustingly resilient Great Unclean one with the 4 up, Feel No Pain, with 3 guns from your Stompa. Pop rerolls to hit, pop big shells for bigger gets, choose sustain, and simply shoot your Death Storm Cannon, your Mega Rocket, and your Gatling gun. Your Gatling gun itself is wounding that boy on what is 4s now, with flat damage 3, taking him to his 4 up. You're just throwing buckets of wounds into this guy. Even with this 4 up, Feel No Pain, you're blending him in 1 activation of shooting. So if you're killing the Great Unclean one with the 4 up, Feel No Pain, even if he's re-rolling saving throws of 1 with simply 3 guns from your 2 CP investment, just know you're standing up to just about anything in the game. How you choose to spread his guns really does matter, because you can choose, I'm going to use the big Mega Rocket and the Gatling to shoot 1 baby knight, and I'm going to use his Death Storm Cannon to shoot another baby knight, whatever you may be. What I do always advise is to not shoot all of his guns, just shoot his 3 primary guns, and don't take hazardous tests for the rest of them. It's simply not worth it, but do consider getting into location to charge, and we'll talk about that. He is playable on GW terrain. We'll talk about where we're going to stage him and how you would maybe move him up the field in a second when I look out the layouts. Transport. He does have a 22 transport capacity. You can put a fat old unit of Grots inside of him. 80 points, throw fat unit of Grots in him. They're not participating in the game. You're not really worried about those points. They're not getting shot and chipped away. And then as you come to either throw him up to the middle of the table or start to play for the primary later in the game once he's deleted stuff, big old brick of Grots get out. Try to take an objective. If you're worried about actually getting charged, big old brick of Grots get out, and they can reactive move when people try to get closer to your Stompa and try to stop off a charge possibly. So take advantage of his transport capability sometimes. If you're scared of your mech getting killed, he can go inside there, pop out after the Stompa moves, and give you +1 to hit. Totally fine. Tip for the Stompa: control the space around your Stompa. This is the thing I always advise to everybody on the Discord, everybody that I talk to about Stompas. When they talk about my Stompa died. So my last 2 points go in tandem, right? Your Stompa is most likely to die at the 24-inch range or closer, or in combat. So a lot of the time people go, hey man, I don't want to take my Stompa because I'm scared to get alpha struck. You know what I'm saying? Like that Lehman Russ exterminator is going to destroy you. That Lehman Russ is going to destroy you anyways, bro. You don't play the Stompa based off 1 exception or 1 unit that can just gunline you off the other side of the table, right? When I took my Stompa Max Cans list to the RTT this last weekend, I didn't go, well, you know, there's a Tau player there and he's gonna rail cannon me. Can't use my Stompa. I just looked at him and go, I hope I don't line up with you, bro. And if I do, whatever. That's just the way of the game, right? Then you pay attention to the things we talked about earlier, and you hope he goes for the Morkanaut, right? Hope he goes for the Morkanaut Twitch. So when you're playing the Stompa, you can't look at what's going to shoot me away at turn one from the other side of the table. If that's the case, then you're playing Stompa anyways. You shouldn't really care. We're talking about, you know, control the terms you can control, which is controlling the space around the Stompa and understanding your actual danger range is within 24 inches, right? A sleeper unit that kills Stompas sometimes are, let's say, a Gladius, critical 5+, Hellblaster unit, ignoring cover, and getting sustained lethals and doing, of course, Oath of Moment. That's something within 24 inches that can blow away a Stompa. But that's a very particular type of unit. For the most part, you're thinking of Eradicators, you're thinking of a Soul Forge packed gun line of Chaos Marines, stuff like that. So if you're looking for mid-range potential, now these are things you can interact with. You can take big bricks of Grots to charge them. You can take Zod, Rot Wartsnaga to actually get in the way of melee units if it's a big unit of Exalted 8-pound. If it's Angron, you can take Zod, utilize his reactionary move, and block those guys in so they can get into combat with your Stompa. That's where, when you're playing with your Stompa, understand that you can use Storm Boys, Shock Jump Dragstas, a Snickra, maybe a Commando, even though not really Commandos because they're really expensive. Unit of basic boys, like we talked about, the transport capabilities, other units of basic Grots. Anything you can to just move up the field and not allow enemies to, one, stage in small L pieces of terrain and countercharge you. Two, not come in from reserve and simply throw Eradicator bombs into you is two. And then three, understanding that you still have to play the mission. Therefore, the other stuff on your list that are alongside your Stompa should be going forward and trying to score you points. If you simply bring all guns, either you're playing on a bowling ball terrain setup, which is fine. Good job, you brought the Stompa. But two is that you're going to end up getting overwhelmed by enemies that can pressure you, and you're not going to get enough lines of fire. Sometimes these shooting units that you want to bring for Orks all require CP investment, and then you start going, where do I spend my CP on? I can't get reliable outcomes on these units because they all want CP and my Stomp is eating it all. So you want to bring units that don't care about CP. I highly advise the Flash Kits because they work in any detachment without CP investment. I advise Storm Boys because they can disembark from transports and run around the field and advance and charge little skirmish units. I advise Bikers and Buggies because they have moderate durability profiles per unit. And they have the data sheet ability, like the Shock Jump Dragster, to just jump into locations so the enemies can't drop in within range of you. And then just a booty load of Grots. When I bring my Stompa, I bring a booty load of Grots, right? So just understand your Stompa's threat range and understand what's actually more likely to kill him. Just know if you're getting gunline from across the table, you know, stuff just happens, you know. So here's going to be the example I feel like using for the Stompa, because everybody likes to talk gloom and gloom. So I want to use something that's a little gloomy. So here we have layout 8. Yes, layout 8 with Crucible of Battle. This is arguably one of the worst deployments for the Stompa / any kind of shooting army. But guess what? I was playing layout 8 with the RTT with my Stompa. So I actually have some takeaways here. Now, one thing to consider when you're playing with the Stompa on this list is these. Make sure I can actually write on this before I start touching stuff. Yes. Can you guys see this? Yes, you can. Okay. Nope, I did it again. I'm gonna get this, guys. Don't worry. Making sure I can do this. Oh, that's what I was asking me. There it goes. Okay. One thing to really pay attention to when you're playing the Stompa or any type of layout 8, something you got to pay attention to is these L-shaped ruins, right? This is where you really want your Grots to really come into play, or even Storm Boys. So in this game, one, of course, I would say Grots are going to have to go up here to really come up and either reactionary move or line up the outside of this building so enemies can't jump out and stage to charge you. Because what you're going to be doing in this layout, or what I did, is trying to take the Stompa and run him through the middle of the table. Now, the layout I actually played on, they ended up having the L-shaped rune like this, which ended up playing a little bit of a difference for me here. But some people either have this one L the other way or L this way. Every terrain, you know, location where you're at, it's based off a little bit different. But what you're going to do is try to find the hole, because the Stompa, either he can Stompa can go here, or if he's going to have to go because he's about 7 inches wide. These are about 4 inches. So the Stompa could hypothetically fit and go through here because he does have enough room to through there. Point is, when I played this layout, everything right here in the middle is able for the Stompa to get through. Now, it is determinant based off what your terrain's going to have. They're going to have like a little piece of rune, or if these going to be actual cargo containers. That does different person by person. Even if it is cargo containers, you can run up and touch these because you're going to look over them and shoot them. The point of this objective when you have the Stompa is, one, if you can stage up and look over any of these terrain pieces, right? If you can look and tag this, anything on this stage, you can get tremendous line of fire to shoot everything. And you're going to want to cut the table in half here because that's why the Stompas, the Grots, are going to come to the bottom, right? Or two, you're going to be advancing and shooting because you have the Stompa to try to actually get off across the middle of the battlefield. Easier said than done, but understand you can actually use advance, assault, and shoot, so you can kind of wiggle with 14 inches of movement. A lot of you guys are going, well, I can't do this. If you play on WTC, you can't do this. But if you play at a local game store, if you play at a normal RTT, you will know based off your normal events which one of these could do. And mind you, this is the absolute worst layout for shooting and the Stompa that I chose to use for this example, because even in that worst example, you should understand your strengths and your weaknesses. Your strengths are you simply have to tag something and you can shoot everything, right? If I can stage up through here, tag right here, then I can shoot. I have open line of fire to all of this part of the game now. I guess not if someone staged up right behind me here, right? But I have open line of fire to most of the game now, so the rest of my Grots can interact and participate in the game. Like I said, your Grots are going to come up here, right? And this mission is beautiful for something like a Zagrot Wartsnaga to go up and stage in this terrain, fill up this terrain, and threaten your enemy's home deployment zone. So you can have your Zod come over here. You can have your Stompa come up in here. Of course, it's some of your army, but now you've actually controlled all of this part of the table, and everything else can swarm the middle. You can control your home objective and your northern objective, and still kind of get all your shots downfield. Just know when you're playing the Stompa, you shouldn't sweat the game too much. Just know it's obviously going to have weaknesses. It's up to you to dictate and control your terms of engagement when you're playing with the Stompa. But I do strongly advise giving it a shot. So next we go to Killa Kans Tactics. So Killa Kans are one of those units that's highly contentious. People do not like to give Killa Kans love, and I don't blame them because GW absolutely ruined our data sheet capability, our data sheet keyword. So something really important here that I want to point out to Ork players, for something I think Ork players overlook, like I mentioned with rapid ingress, is the walker keyword. So we have vehicle keyword / walker keyword. Vehicle keywords in red because it's actually a detriment to us when we're playing with Killa Kans. There are plenty of anti-vehicle weapons in the game that really do a number on us. Some of those are only damage 2, therefore reducing damage by 1 can actually offset this. But one thing is the walker keyword. The walker keyword gives us something that is always slept on as an Ork player, which is heroic intervention. Now, the fact that we don't heroic intervene is simply due to the fact that we tend to get clapped and die because we don't actually get saves. Killa Kans actually have capability to survive getting slapped, even if you only lose 1 can. If you got a free charge off because you heroically intervened and covered all that distance, it tends to kind of even out and not really matter, right? So Killa Kans actually pose the threat that, one, they can actually heroic intervene for other units if enemies get a little bit too weary, end up get a little bit too aggressive on them. A lot of the time, I do like to escort my Killa Kans with Grots. So I like to take 22-man size unit of Grots, try to have them somewhere near my Killa Kans. That way I can try to reactive move and stop my Killa Kans from getting countercharged in melee, as that's one of their biggest weaknesses for due to their lower mobility. Now, their data sheet ability is optional, right? So a lot of the time people look at their data sheet ability. There's roll a d6. On a 1 to 2, you blow yourself up. On a 3 to 4, it's +1 strength to your ranged weapon. And then on a 5 to 6, it's 1 additional shot to your ranged weapon. Very, very, very circumstantial that you ever want to use those. I advise you to simply don't use them because you would take d6 mortals before even shooting. That means you could just simply lose an entire grot. We can. The button benefits are great for a Killa Kan. We're just going to be assuming that you're running the Killa Kan with rockets. So just imagine that regardless of what way you're delivering the offense, whether it's the same lethal or additional AP, flat damage 3, -2 AP, punches or rockets feel really good for any of those buffs. If you are going into let's say you're going into a baby knight and you happen to roll for additional damage AP because you don't really want to kill yourself, you can't, for some reason you can't afford it, right? You don't want to give them, bring it down and max it. Let's just say that you roll for the button, you give yourself additional AP. You can simply roll additional AP and you have -4 AP on your punches. Every damage 3 is going straight through the baby knight. Boom, he's dead. You can end up choosing sustain. Feels really good for the rocket attacks. Nonetheless, the button feels really good for him. But the Killa Kans are heavily reliant. Like we said about the Stompa, the Killa Kans are trying to eat up all of your CP. Now, is it worth it? A lot of times it's actually worth it. They're one of the weirdest units that feels really nice to use almost any of these strats in the game in the detachment with. Of course, they can't reactive move. They cannot reactive move, but the other strats feel really good on them. The fact that they can reduce damage by 1 with shooting means they're a bit harder to displace than you can imagine. We'll talk about the CPU usage now, though. So as for the unique volume of offense that they bring, when I mention that, it's because they have either a good amount of punches, as each can is 3 punches up to 4 on the wall. They get blast rockets or they get flamers that are all D6. The plethora of damage 3 is something that nothing else in our book actually brings us, right? There are other units that you can mention that bring damage 3, but nobody can bring it in the volume that Killa Kans can bring it. So we have 6-man unit does not suffer from coherency. This is something that I wanted to mention because I noticed a lot of people in the community go, well, they're a 6-man unit. They're hard to kind of move around. Coherency is a 7-man unit. 7-man unit before you have to actually be within 2 different models at all times, right? So you can actually run these guys at a little bit of a line, make a little bit of space for them. It doesn't feel as bad as you would if you were trying to move them in coherency. So if anybody was wondering that, if you're coming back to the game, welcome. They don't suffer from coherency like you would imagine because they're a 6-unit model. Like I was speaking about, though, damage 3/4 in melee and blast rockets into 3 wound elite infantry. So you're saying damage 3/4 melee? What do you mean? There's a strat for Clanking Claws in Dread Mob that allows any Orc Walker +2 strength, +1 damage if you supercharge the button, right? Meaning your Killa Kans can get up to flat strength 10, -2 AP, flat damage 4 base. They can do that just for spending 1 CP. Of course, on the wall, they get up to damage strength 11. They get 4 punches instead. That makes a huge difference, guys. When you start running around and saying, hey, this unit gets a multitude of almost Gazgul equivalent punches, they can get sustained as well. It becomes outrageous. Other armies do not see it coming. They're not expecting it. And like I said, no other unit in our codex does this. Of course, there are Deff Dreads that can bring damage 3. They can't bring the volume. Of course, there's Gazgul Thraka that brings damage 4. He doesn't bring the volume. More reliability, but it doesn't bring the volume. Of course, there's damage 6 that comes from the Gorkanaut and Morkanaut. Can't come in the vast volume that these damage 4 punches come from our Killa Kans. Not to mention, you're also doing them in shooting and it's in blast. So if you're dealing with Terminators, Gravis Marines, elite infantry like 8-bound, if you're dealing with Leagues of Voltan infantry that are, T6 as well, units that have Feel No Pains, other Orks, whatever it may be, the fact that you're throwing damage 3 rockets at them and then you're drumming and punching them with damage 3 is outrageous. They do have the dreaded combo of advanced shoot and charge, something that Orcs simply do not have. The fact that we have access to advanced shoot and charge, of course, it's only on the wall because it's the only time you could advance and charge, means that the Killa Kans, if you're bringing at least 1 unit, get 1 turn of just straight YOLO dash across the field into your opponent. So they can use 1 CP so they can advance and shoot. It has a built-in re-roll charge with that 1 CP. Therefore, you're actually compounding that with your want to charge, because you're deciding, okay, I'm going to move, I'm going to advance so I can shoot, but I'm giving a better advance because I'm going to charge after. It feels really, really good. It is a lot of CP because you're using, let's say, 1 CP for rapid ingress, then you're using 1 CP for assault and shoot, then maybe you're using a CP for reroll hits, then maybe you're using a CP for clanking claws for +1 damage, +2 strength. So just know you need a lot of CP when you're running these cans, but it will give you access to damage outputs that are unheard of in Orks, that really blow your enemies away. Like I said, they're in a rapid ingress target. You guys don't have rapid ingress a month. And then last is require high investment for the enemy to remove. So a lot of people go, these guys are just soft. They're just soft. They are. They're easy to kill because they're T6, and they don't have great invulns. You know, they can get a 6-up, is base built in 6-up, and then get a 5-up. But anything in 40k is killable, guys. You got to accept that. And as an Ork player, you're not looking about, can this die? You're looking about, what terms does this die? What value can I get out of this death? How much investment can I get from the enemy so that I can now countercharge them and then bulldoze them forward with momentum? So for an enemy to actually displace 250 points of 30 wounds, T6 bleed plus armor, possibly 5-up invul unit, is way more than you would be expecting. Way more investment than you would think actually conceive of in your head as an Ork player, not including the -1 damage to shooting. So a lot of the time you guys go, well, and this guy dies to anything. He dies to what? A whole unit of Hellblasters plus a Land Raider Redeemer, and the Hellblasters have character support. Well, you've just pretty much got an investment of like a 500 and maybe 560 point combo right there, not including the CP investment to get that enemy unit removed. You know, try to actually take advantage of the fact that they're eventually going to die, because understand that the amount of damage this unit brings and the profile it brings on the battlefield means the enemy is definitely going to pay attention to it and definitely try to counteract it. And if it does not, they will be horrifically blitzkrieged and ran over by a brick of Killa Kans in a way that you should respect and the enemy will come to soon. So real quick, I just want to talk about what would I do if I had these cans on the field. So Killa Kans are one of those units that I like to say you can bring them up in rapid ingress. Okay, I'm drawing. Okay. And bring them up in rapid ingress. They do suffer from the fact that they are horrifically slow. Horrifically slow. So when I'm advising them, I'm really just advising you bring 1 unit to start off as a 6-man unit possibly, and just try to feel them out and understand what CP investment they bring. That being said, favorite spot for cans, this is GW layout 2 for search and destroy. This mission, I do feel fine with bringing them from reserve. Just understand that enemies can easily stage up in this L piece of terrain and end up staging up around this L piece of terrain, so sometimes they can block you out. That being said, I found putting them in this bottom corner right around here and having a big old brick of grots around, kind of staged up, lined up around here, so they can move up the field with them, get through this kind of danger zone, because this is where the enemy's going to want to countercharge, right? They're going to want to countercharge through here. Getting these guys to actually come around the corner and interact with this objective can feel pretty good. Of course, you do have to be threatening of this train piece of people staging in there, but the amount of pressure you can get from the enemy knowing that you can just stage up in here and not really be shot, right? Because Killa Kans are very much slow, but actually getting all of the guns to gain line of fire to kill these guys when they're actually funneled into this lane is, you know, easier said than done. There are units like Hypercrypt and Grey Knights and whatever it may be, but really that gives you credence to actually being able to hide here. And like I said, if you bring them alongside Grots, you can actually end up, you know, using reactive move to stop enemy charges. If you bring commandos or Snick Route, you can end up kind of entertaining or holding this terrain. More stage actually back here if it's a Snick Route. If you are deciding to play this and decide, let's say it's a different still layout but a different deployment, you could end up boning them here, and then they can end up walking through, right? If you do come in from reserves, you ingress them here turn 2, they can end up walking through this blue piece of terrain because that's actually easy to move through. And this is where you would take advantage of advancing, shooting, and charging. So that's another spot that I actually found them to be useful to come into on Search and Destroy GW Layout 2. I have tried to move them towards the middle from here because they can stage up and kind of threaten the middle as well. that ends up working as well. So this is my favorite place if I am to stage them up, if I'm playing Search and Destroy or GW Layout 2, or somewhere behind this piece of terrain over here. That way they can end up advancing, shooting, and charging, and kind of clearing off enemies from that objective as well. And once they are staged up in this part of the game, they can end up kind of threatening the middle table as well. So don't sleep on Killa Kans. Easier said than done to use them. They're one of those units that, one, you just got to get out and get reps into them, and two, you do need to build units around your list that allow them to stage around, actually come in from the table edges, and not really gunk them up. Like if you're bringing a bunch of trucks and battle wagons and things, then of course your Killa Kans are going to have a harder time getting around the battlefield, right? That doesn't mean you shouldn't bring them. And if you have a feeling to bring them, I actually advise that you do. So now we have the Deff Dread Tactics. So Deff Dread is another one of those units that gets a little bit slept on because he's not exactly where everybody wants him to be, but he's almost exactly where you want him to be. So keywords: walker, vehicle. Like we spoke about with the Killa Kans, the Deff Dread is a walker, meaning he can heroic, and he is way easier to get into heroics by himself instead of a big old unit of Killa Kans because he is an individual model and he's smaller. So and he's in his own way durable enough to take the slaps from an enemy if he chooses to heroic and save something. So next is his data sheet ability is a battle shock. It's not at a -1 really, so it really doesn't feel as good as you want it to be, but it can have its circumstantially really cool outcomes. He is the master of versatility. So if you own a Deff Dread and you're choosing to bring one on your list, the best way you want to load him out or bring him is just with the understanding that he's there to offset the weaknesses in your collection and in your list as a whole. So if you really think that you need more high damage, you can bring him. If you need skirmishing units, you can bring him. If you need something for rapid ingress, you bring him. If you need something to be a distraction, you bring him. He can really just play versatility into the game. That being said, at 120 points, he's not exactly where I want him to be. If he comes out another 10, he would become way more likely to end up on my list. So as for what does he do that makes him also a bit more of a cool dude, he's not as heavily reliant on CP as his counterparts. So we spoke about the Stompa, heavily reliant on CP. We talk about Killa Kans, heavily reliant on CP. The Deff Dread is not really that reliable on TP. He can take advantage of them at all times because he likes all the same strats that the Killa Kans does. But because he's an individual model and because of the loadout that he's going to use that we're going to talk about in a bit, means that sometimes he just activates and he just goes off on his own, just gets stuck in with not requiring a bunch of CC support. That being said, he doesn't really always require mech support either. Are there loadouts that you can bring him and use a mech to make him more reliable? Sure. But the whole point of a Deff Dread is really for a skirmish kind of bruiser type of unit. He's meant to go out there, kind of get the game kickstarted going, try to get interactions going, try to get enemy to invest in killing him, get an overcommitment from your enemy, and then countering them punching up. So don't be scared to lose your Deff Dread. It's just about timing on when you're going to use them and where you're going to use them. Speaking of where you're going to use them, he is my favorite QRF unit. Now, what do I mean by QRF? QRF is a meaning abbreviation for quick response force. So that's why I put it right along rapid ingress. So a lot of the time you're going to bring your Deff Dread because he's going to be in reserve. You're going to be looking around the battlefield. You're going to say, okay, my northern flank looks like the enemy didn't invest as much. I think I can make it up that kind of side of the field. Therefore, I'm going to bring my Deff Dread in, and I'm going to QRF, quick response force, keep pressuring that side of the field. Or, I end up repositioning poorly. My enemy ended up deep striking this unit of Terminators closer up my deployment zone that I want. I'm going to bring my QRF, rapid ingress, Deff Dread in. Sure, maybe he can't completely destroy the problematic unit, but he can delay it or threaten it to the point that the enemy doesn't get to freely just overwhelm me. So quick response force for the Deff Dread, meaning where he ends up isn't going to be like your entire game plan going into the game. Maybe like the Killa Kans, for example, where you're building it into your list so that you can actually bring them on. But your Deff Dread is going to be in position so he can kind of just show up where you need him. One thing is he is shout out to the claws. He said I spelled claw wrong. Yes, I did. Did I spell it wrong? Yeah, typo. See, I spelled it right and then I spelled it wrong. It switched on its own. Don't judge me. Then we have He has a 2+ save, and he actually has access to -1 damage, which is rare for an orc. So him having a 2+ save feels fantastic. Being moderately good, not great toughness, but a moderately acceptable toughness and amount of wounds means, like I said, he feels good for heroic intervention. He feels good for skirmishing with cheap kind of chaff units. But he does fall short when you get into fights with anything that's like, somewhat killing on the game. So don't rely too much on his durability. He only has 8 wounds. Now we speak about his loadouts, because that's the most important part. So as for his loadouts, we have 3 loadouts that I really want to talk about. Of course, there's a bunch that you can end up using, but the 3 main ones I like to talk about and I like to nickname. So we have 1, the Skirmisher. So he is triple Scorchers and a Claw. I call him the Skirmisher because 1, he's really just meant to go out there and face all comers. He can decide, I'm going to threaten an enemy vehicle because I'm going to throw random flamers at it. I decide I'm going to destroy a bunch of chaff T3 infantry because I have a bunch of flamers. I'm going to go chip away these Gravis Marines and then punch them down and hope I can keep them in combat. I'm going to charge this Rhino and not kill it, but hold it in place. Whatever it may be, your skirmish Deff Dread is just all-purpose get that goes around and throws wounds into everybody he can, because a bunch of flamers feels good, and then you have a leftover arm to try to get some leftover punches in once you finish doing your kind of combined arms. It also feels nice to be able to go, I'm going to advance and shoot a bunch of flamers and charge. Of course, there's a bunch of other units you can end up doing it for, but smaller games, whatever it may be, it could be cool. Next is the Nuke. So this is a unit that I lovingly call the Nuke because this is a little bit suicidal. So you can take 4 custom Mega Blasters and or Force rockets, depending on how much hazard you really care about. Nonetheless, you're going to end up popping reroll hits from Daka Daka, big shells for bigger gets anyways, and you're going to be just acting as a nuke and trying to delete an enemy unit. Is this a reliable thing to do? No, it simply lacks the AP to do it reliably, but there are some pretty hilarious and funny results you can get from doing the nuke. Next is the Hunter, which is 4 claws or 3 claws and a Scorcher. So the Hunter is something you end up putting on your list if you're directly looking to hunt down problematic 3 wound units. Or a unit that maybe you want to take the damage 4 into, because you can put Clanking Claws on there and end up putting damage 4 punches into them. This is one of the units that you're intentionally looking to hunt down an enemy problematic elite infantry that maybe your collection doesn't have a lot of options for. Maybe you're just tired of getting negated damage 1. Maybe whatever it may be, the Hunter is where you come into play, especially in a smaller game where he can go around and bullying problematic elite infantry, or even 4 wound models that you really just want to punch off the table. So shout out to the Deff Dread, because he's almost where we want him to be, right? He's almost. As for the Deff Dread, a little bit similar to the Killa Kan. I'm using a different color for the Deff Dread because I feel like it. A little similar to the Killa Kan. Deff Dread feels really good when you can actually, oops, don't look at that. Close your eyes. Okay, when you can actually get him to come down the lanes, right? Like I said, for Killa Kans or even the Gorkanaut, Morkanaut, when you're taking advantage of these ingress units as an orc player, understand that the fact that you're not going to be getting as many guns into you when you're coming down these lanes is a little bit of a defensive buff to you already. If you're playing Gorkanaut, Morkanaut, whatever, Deff Dread's running into the middle, big unit of cans like this, you're getting hit from multiple angles of fire where you can end up just getting deleted. You can get fires here, angle of fire here. Somebody get an angle of fire here. Some random hobo get an angle of fire down here. Everybody will just kind of gather up on you. Instead of you coming in from ingress down here, coming in somewhere over here, coming in over here, right? Stuff like that means less units can actually target you. So you're less likely to end up getting annihilated when you come in from ingress, right? So that's where I like to bring my Deff Dreads in. And he stages so well in something like a little pocket like here, right? There's other layouts and stuff we can use where he can feel really good, but nonetheless, if you're playing on the other side, you can end up putting him like right here. Like I said, he ends up staging up where he can go in there. He can end up threatening this kind of deployment zone, so you can end up putting him here, and then when the enemy decides to commit, he can come around the corner. If you're playing here, you can end up kind of throwing him there, and then he can come around the corner. Spoke about the flamers, so just understand he's like a skirmisher, banter. He's easy to kind of get involved in the game if you're understanding that he's going to die after he gets involved in the game. So he's really one of my favorite ingress units. So yeah, With that being said, we move on to last but certainly not least, my big boy, the Gargantuan Squiggoth. Whoa! So the Gargantuan Squiggoth ain't getting no love because GW hates us. GW, why'd you do that? That was so unnecessary. So if you're gonna be playing the Gargantuan Squiggoth, I favor him in Warhorde. Now, will I entertain an argument for taking him in Dread Mob? Yes, but I'll finish the video on that. So we have Warhorde. The reason why you have Warhorde is simply fight on death. A lot of the time, your Gargantuan Squiggoth's going to run up in there, YOLO up into the field, sometimes get charged first and then getting punched off the table. There are stuff that can end up killing him. Yeah, he has negative codex support, exactly. And there are units that can end up killing him. So being able to fight on death so you can at least kill something with him feels really good. Giving him critical 5+ is nice, that you can just be like, yes, my damage 12 lance punch is duplicating. It's outrageous. It makes up for him hitting on 3s, because last thing you want is your high value punches to not get through. Like I said, not much support. In Index Hammer, he used to be able to pop Artist Nails. It was fantastic. It was magnificent. We loved it, and they took it from us. Him, like the Stompa, I strongly advise you control the space around and in front of him. So what I mean by that, I mean something like a Zagra or a Death Killer Wartrike. Like I said, you are playing Warhorde, so that Death Killer Wartrike is going to have that 4-up Feel No Pain. Being able to run up the field and stop counter charges will feel really good. Using Zagra to run up and touch enemy tank lines, or getting in the way of like gun path, gun lines where they can end up staging a bunch of tanks in one spot and shoot you, could help you. But honestly, nonetheless, he's really going to get killed if its enemies have enough weapons to kill him. He's not really well supported, and you're really just hoping for the wall to keep him alive. The biggest takeaway for him, other than his fantastic melee profile, his gun's kind of cool. He has a 20 firing deck. I do like putting burners in there, because you can put a bunch of burners they can shoot out, so he doesn't get bogged down in the fight. Put a bunch of flash kits in there. That way, once he gets killed, you have a bunch of flash kits that are now in range to shoot, pop lethal, and get a charge off, because hopefully he covered enough distance for you to actually, counter charge and shoot someone away. Now for my conjecture, my fun idea. As I've been playing with the Stompa, Gorkanaut, Morkanaut, Dread Mob, I'm just having fun for the most part. We know what's good in Orks. We know what can be better. I just want to have fun. So one thing I notice is, I've been playing the Gorkanaut and the Morkanaut and the Stompa, or even double Gorkanauts, and I'm not the only one. Am I crazy to say that could you run a Gargantuan Squiggoth and a Stompa together? I mean, am I? Am I really that outrageous, guys? Because yes, I understand that there's armies that are going to kill him, right? But the same amount of investment that we required to kill the Stompa are going to be required to kill the Gargantuan Squiggoth for half the cost. And once you're right there looking at my Gargantuan Squiggoth, I get to erase you. So I did have a game where I went into Imperial Knights with my Stompa and my Max Killa Kans. I've done this matchup several times, so at least I had several reps. Just know that if you can get those knights to invest in going into one of your targets, your Stompa is easily shooting away one and then shooting away the other next turn. I do worry about you counter charging, because they could fight on death and take you down with them. But if you're feeling froggy, go ahead and jump. So that being said, there are a little bit of games and argument that you want to bring the Gargantuan Squiggoth with the Stompa. If you're bringing a Gargantuan Squiggoth, how much do you really care already, right? That's why we're having this discussion, me and you and that get. I'm looking at you. Yes, you. If you're already bringing the Gargantuan Squiggoth, you really want to, there's a chance that there might be a way to do it if you bring Gargantuan Squiggoth plus the Stompa, and then you bring a bunch of stuff like Zod, jetpacks, maybe some other units to play the mission. That way, once you just YOLO up the field and Stompa picks up everything in response, that hopefully you scored enough points that you didn't get tabled in vain. So that being said, that's how we get supercharged from the Titanic walkers. Whoa, for the WAAAGH tactics. Now, I want to go into the chat, see if I missed anything, because this is done live and I was pretty pumped and excited. Hopefully I didn't miss anything. So let's get a couple super chats from our favorite gets. We got Wicked Joe with 10 WAAAGH Tactic gifted memberships. Whoa, for Wicked Joe. Welcome to see you back, buddy. I appreciate you. It's been a long time. And so thank you for being back. And he says he got some WAAAGH Tactic dice for his Cruise Hammer. Ooh, he's out here on Cruise Hammer. Handing out a D6 to whoever you crump. Yeah, let's go. And here's some WAAAGH Tactics now that I crumped you. He says, great job. Many thanks for all the contact. Actually, you guys see it. Eddie, the rise of the green tide sails in 10 days. Let's go, Wicked Joe. Make sure you get a crump in. Enjoy that. Have fun, because the whole point of why we do this hobby is for the people and for the time we get to have fun playing with our toys. So I hope you got that stuff painted up, because I remember you get. And thank you very much for the support. Then, of course, we have my boy. Where's boy? I see you. ECOP for 5 WAAAGH Tactic gifted memberships. Whoa! He doesn't have a comment here, but thank you very much for always supporting. It really means a lot, because we're able to do more and hopefully be better content and improve what we're doing here, striving to get better. So thank you for everybody. And of course, leave a comment and let us know how we could improve. And let's see. He goes, yeah, miss when you're rolling. Make sure I don't miss anything. You can absolutely. Stompas can kill Katans. Yes, Stompas can definitely kill Katans. Except for one time I ran to Nightbringer. My boy, he just would not die. He got some Gargantuan Squiggoth in champ. Yes. Yeah, he does immediately get blown up. That's what I'm talking about. That's why you bring a Stompa. That way, once he gets blown up, you just blow up whatever blew him up. Oh, no, you spelled the claw wrong. Yes, I did. I spelled it wrong and right. Oh, see, would a Stompa Gargantuan Squiggoth do well against a Morty DG list? Because my buddy's a DG main. I'll tell you what, the Stompa himself just deletes Morty 9 out of 10 times, maybe 9.9 out of 10 times if you pop all the CP like we spoke about. Is the Gargantuan Squiggoth going to go well? DG has a lot of lethals, so they're going to pull a lot of lethals off on him. Not sure if he's necessary for that, but bringing the Stompa definitely can work into Death Guard. It's just the rest of your list is the issue, right? But it's funny enough, you never know. Killa Kans might work into Death Guard too. And I did run max Killa Kans and a Stompa recently. It was super fun. He says, thanks for the advice on the Squiggoths. If mine is finished by December, I try to run a local tournament. And you should run them for fun, dude. I mean, that's why we do these things, right? I had to take my own advice and do what the things I say, and I started. I just go, hey, I'm going to take my Stompa, my max Killa Kans to an event. I'll take my Stompa, my Gorkanaut, and Morkanaut. Like, I wanted to get reps in against people, that I didn't know, people that didn't see it coming, get their opinions about it overall. And I just came to the conclusion that people for fun, RTT level, local game store leagues, whatever, I promise you can run the Stompa. I promise you can run the Gorkanauts and Morkanauts. I promise you can run Killa Kans and Deff Dreads. All of these things can be run at anything other than a GT level event. I can promise you it. At a GT level event, I don't know, we got to start talking now. Now there's more terms and conditions and context we have to do, which you can meet me in the Discord to talk about. But if it's just about running these things for fun, because you're a person that just wants to enjoy the toys that you have, you want to just play with these gits because you've had them in your pile, your shelf, and they're all painted up, and you want to use them. You're just like me. That's what I wanted to do. So I made sure I found a way to do them, and I'm bringing that to you. So with that in mind, I hope that this encourages you guys and really makes you guys want to use all of the different units in diverse ways, and understand that, of course, there's more details and context to it. I do understand that it's easier said than done, but I would not advise you to do anything that I haven't done myself, because I'm no better than you. I'm just a Warhammer player, just like any other git, and a very passionate war boss. And then let's see what my boy says here. He goes, I run double Stompa at 2k points, and it just delete whatever it brings. Only thing that's ever given me trouble is the Silent King, Necrons, double Doomsday Arc. Yeah, and it totally works. Even the double Stompa. I know what's his name? Gosh. He stopped posting for a while. How am I having his freaking news name? I'll remember in a bit. But he was like, hey, I'm gonna run 2 Stompas, and he ran them at RTT and encourage everybody running them. And I'm on side with him. I'm on board with him. Gosh, $1 Billion Clown Farm. God, I just remembered. $1 Billion Clown Farm was saying, I don't care. I just want to run fun stuff. I don't think you should just completely, give up on playing competitive and playing Orks to win as a whole, like he was kind of alluding to. But I do think you guys should open your minds and not say, hey, I have to run just truck spam. I have to run just Warhard. I have to run just whatever good. Understand that the people who do have to run that are the people that have to do it because they're trying to win golden tickets. They have to do it because they're trying to go 4-1 in events. If the rest of us are just trying to have fun and play games and get stuck in and enjoy stuff, understand that all these units are playable, all to different degrees. And I hope that the tips, advice, and the tricks that we talked about today help you get stuck in and really bring a rise to the green tide. So thank you guys very much for being here. Leave a like and subscribe so that we may grow and get better. We're almost at 4K. We're almost on our way. So anything we can do to get better, make sure you leave a like and comment in the chat so that we can know what we can do. Just know that these are live, so be sure to catch them more often, and there's way more to come. And there's always one thing to keep in mind. Is don't cross our wall, because we knock your teeth out. Whoa!